Hey everybody, it's Nathaniel Avila reporting from Dallas, Fort Worth, and I'm here with Timbrel Hildebrand reporting from Crowley, Texas. And today we're going to be talking about Newsies, the original 1992 film by Kenny Ortega, not the more recent stage version. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So now this film was actually made by, as I said, it was made by Kenny Ortega, the guy who would eventually go on to make High School Musical and the This Is It Michael Jackson concert. Um, so how do we feel about like this film being one of his like earlier works?
I think honestly it's one of his stronger films, given the ones that came after.
Oh, even better than Cheetah Girls World Tour, whatever.
Oh yes, Legion's better.
Oh snap! Even better than Hocus Pocus.
Oh, I've never seen that. I've heard good things about it. I didn't know he did that.
Oh yeah. So, like, I'm gonna say a little bit of backstory on this film. So, it actually is based off of a real life uh, newspaper, newspaper boy protest that happened in New York City in 1899. And this film basically centers around that event. So, do 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 do. All right, so the real one, it lasted from July 20th to August 2nd in 1899, and the leader of the strike was a one-eyed boy named Louis Belletti, who is nicknamed Kid Blink, who spoke with a heavy Brooklyn accent, and that was often phonetically transcribed when he was quoted by newspapers. Uh, yeah, so in this case, Kid Blink is in the film. He is in the film, but he is basically reduced to a minor supporting character in the background. You can see him because he wears an eye patch and stuff. So while the role of the strike leader is given to a fictional character named Jack Cowboy Kelly, who is played by Christian Bale, a teenage Christian Bale. And so Kid Blink and the other real life and another real life newsie named Morris Cohen were the inspiration for Kelly. And the actual strike ended with compromise, where the World and Journal agreed to buy back all unsold copies of newspapers, and the history of the Newsboys strike of 1899 was later told in a David Nassau book called Children of the City. Then, when Disney got a hold of it, uh, so Disney taped its film financing, actually tapped its film financing partner Torchwood Pacific Partners to fund the film, and the production had a $15 million budget. And so they also got Alan Menken to do like the songs and stuff. Unfortunately, Howard Ashman, his longtime like partner, he had AIDS at this time, and he was unable to work with Menken for the first time. And then he eventually died on March 14th, 1991, that year. So Menken brought in another guy named Jack Feldman to fulfill that role. And then when it was released in April 10th, 1992, from the distributor Buena Vista, the film ended up not recouping its $15 million budget, and it ended up making only a measly $2.9 million, which is like a fifth of that. So, like, why do you think it didn't do so well in the box office?
Honestly, I don't know. It might have just been, it was a bad time for it to release or something like that. Because honestly, I see maybe it's because this kind of movie might have split kid viewers from like young adult viewers, because it's a little bit more adult than your regular Disney romp. So that might have been what split it a little bit. And also, since it was this new original story from a relatively unknown director with relatively unknown actors. Yeah, I don't think Christian Bale was a really big name at that time. So
Yeah,
it probably just kind of flew under the radar. It's just another Disney musical that kind of just went under the radar. I mean, the early '90s, probably the animated flicks were getting more traction than live action ones.
Oh yeah, like this during this time it was like the Disney Renaissance was going on. So like the Lion King was coming out, and the Little Mermaid came out, and Aladdin came out around that time.
Hmm.
So that might have something to do with it. And I know that the Disney ended up pulling it uh, from like a bunch of theaters after the poor opening during like a poor opening weekend. So that also might have something to do with it as
Huh.
well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So like, what do you think like this film has to say about the power of like the little man going against this big corporation in this David versus Goliath like story?
Oh, I mean, I think it's kind of like your, your average, little guy against society kind of thing. And I think it's really neat because you're seeing these people who were kind of the scum of society rise up and speak up for themselves and refuse to be silenced by the bigger corporations that are running the city. So, yeah, I think it's just a tale of the underdog. Everyone likes a good underdog story.
Mm-hmm. Like, and also like, what do you think this film like? What do you think this film has to say about like the power of the press and everything, especially after Pulitzer's speech about the power of the press is the most powerful thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of shows you that yes, especially back then, and I mean, it's true now. Even though, and I mean, press is so much readily available, on the internet and whatnot. Um, words have power, whether they're true or not. If the masses are reading them, those words are going to have power, regardless of whether they're true or not. So at that point, in that moment, he did have a good point that since he since he was one of the outlets that people got their news from, he told people how to think.
Yeah, and yeah. So like, also, do you think that also holds true today, especially with today's media?
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
Yeah. So like especially like the people who uh listen to or watch like Fox News as compared to like CNN and all that kind of stuff, and the political relationship that uh, the president of the United States currently has with the press, especially after he calls them like the enemy of the people and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, everybody's always going to have a bias. So, I mean, yeah, it's showing that powerful people, they go to the press to, have more power because the press is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's like a huge big thing in this film. And now also a huge thing also has to deal with like greed, because this whole entire inciting incident that happened in the film was Pulitzer wanted to increase the price of newspapers by 10 cents because he wanted more money.
Yeah,
I don't think he was in like hot water, or he just wanted more money. I don't think there's
yeah.
any rhyme or reason. He just wanted money. So, like, what do you think this film had to say about corporate greed?
I mean, it's kind of like the driving force, he's so greedy that he was willing to step on other people in order to get what he wanted, regardless of what the cost might be.
Yeah.
And I think later in the film, at the end, where Jack and David approach Pulitzer, and David says, you're hurting yourself at this point just to not just to, deprive us of 10 cents. And Jack says, well, the point is now it's not about the money, it's about the fact that he has the power and we don't. If he gives in to us, then we have the power.
Mm-hmm. So it's like more of like a pride thing going in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and also like let's look at like the other side of the coin, which was Bill Pullman's character. Uh, what was his name? Durant or something?
Denton.
Denton. Now his character, I believe he was considered to be like the good reporter, reporting like the Newsies strikes and everything. But
Yeah.
I think he eventually betrays them or something.
Well, he caves more or less.
Okay. So what do you think that has? What do you think his role in the film was?
I mean, he was kind of he was kind of the Newsies sort of I guess driving force, because well, not driving force, but he was their support because he got their news out to the masses. Like he helped them be heard more articulately.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that makes his like his caving in more more devastating for the Newsies?
Oh yeah, because he was their friend. He stood by them when nobody else would. So yeah, it's definitely devastating when he decides to kind of cave in and not help them.
Yeah, and then also, what do you think? Like this film, like also has a lot to do with like deceit and lying, especially with Kelly, who is lying about his identity. That his real name was actually Francis Sullivan, and that
Yeah,
he ran away from this like juvenile hall like place.
yeah.
Uh, so, what do you think that reflects of his character?
I think it makes. I really like Jack's character in this. He's very dynamic, and that's what I think is really lost in the Broadway version that they made. But that's neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
But what you see here is this is a kid who he represents that sort of charismatic leader archetype that you see behind many movements, both good and bad. So you see that in him, in that he doesn't know much. He's not very like he's pretty smart, but he's not super smart. That's why he needs David, because David's more articulate and he's better at coming. He's better at coming up with the plans and whatnot. Not so much that he's more articulate, but he thinks things through more logically. And Jack has the tendency to kind of just fly off the handle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so the fact that he's that he's lying, it gives him depth, because he's definitely not perfect. He's somewhat out for himself too, and he doesn't want to admit the fact that he doesn't have anybody and that he's all by himself. Like, he kind of depends on this sort of legend like status that he's given himself, that he's built up, this reputation, if you will. So it makes him more interesting. It he hurts because he doesn't have a family. He hurts. You see that all through the song Santa Fe, how he's kind of jealous of Davy because David has a family, and the friendship that they build between him and Jack, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah. Before we move on, I just saw this right now on this Wikipedia article. The guy who played Kid Blink with the eye patch, that was actually Trey Parker. I did not know
Who's
that.
that?
He made a little animated show called South Park.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, wow. That kid with the eye patch is the creator of South Park.
Oh yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I did not know that. That was, well, yeah, humble beginnings.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Oh yeah. So like moving on to like the relationship between David and Jack. I know that David is definitely like the juxtaposition to Jack, because like David is the much more like level-headed guy. Um was he the guy who busted him out of jail?
Um, I mean, he came and he busted him out of Pulitzer's house.
Oh, that's right. The Pulitzer. Like he busted him out of like custody.
Yeah,
Uh
sort of.
so like in that brief moment he realized he kind of like adapts to Jack's like personality, and then
Hmm.
after that Jack is like, "Hey, what are you doing? You have a family. You can't act like me. You got to act like how you've been acting." Am I right?
Yeah, sort of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like uh do we like this relationship between Jack and David?
I think it's really cool. You have this, and again, in the Broadway version, you really lose this relationship. Like, they don't nearly develop it. It's kind of like thrown to the side to pursue other avenues. But in this movie, I particularly like it because it's kind of got that brotherly sort of love that you see between him and David, and I think that's really cool because in the end they're both willing to risk almost everything for each other, and I really like that because David's he's real straight laced, Jack has no rules, and so they complement each other in that way, and they need each other, and they grow to care about each other, in that way. And you see that in how David threw caution to the wind to go rescue Jack, and then Jack rebuffed him and turned against all of his friends just to keep Davy and the rest of them safe from being imprisoned or whatever.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really nice friendship that even though you only have a couple of hours to get to know them, like it's very intimate and real sweet, and I like that.
Yeah, there's like this huge like this family like bond that the Newsies have, which is
Yeah.
really good. And so speaking of which, do you think the songs help the story at all?
What do you mean by that?
Well, like I was watching the film and then I was like, "Wow, this is very awesome." And then all of a sudden they start singing and I was like, "Whoa!" Oh snap! I forgot this was a musical.
Well, I mean, I guess it's not super musical. It does kind of feel like a Disney musical because Disney has the tendency like they'll make musicals, but it's not necessarily like a musical where it feels like there's music at every corner.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the fact that it's a musical. That opening number where they're singing "Carrying the Banner of New York" and they're all waking up and running into each other and stuff. I absolutely love it. It's such a rousing anthem to start the movie. So I like the fact that there are songs in it. I think the music works great, and it doesn't hurt that Alan Menken, kind of a veteran of Disney movies and a very talented composer, made all the music and whatnot.
Yeah, we kind of like sad that Ashman was not able to participate in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so like, what was your favorite song? Was it the first one?
That's hard. I really like Santa Fe too. Just all the songs are really good. I also really like it when they're all singing together, saying "Open the gates and seize the day." That's really cool. I like that one too.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard for me to choose. I like all of the songs.
Okay. Is would you say Christian Bale is a good singer?
I wouldn't say he's that great, but I think it works for what this is
Okay.
because I feel like I feel like his kind of, I guess the word would be rough sort of timbre gives the film a little bit more. I don't know. It doesn't seem polished, which fits in the
Mm-hmm.
context of who these boys are. Like if you listen to all of them sing, they all have very distinct styles. Specifically, the one that sticks out to me the most is Racetrack, who has the ridiculously thick Bronx accent, which is actually just how that actor talks in real life. So I think it works that he's not the best singer. That I will give to the Broadway version. The Broadway version has much better singers, but again, I think that the fact that these just sound like regular kids singing, they're not bad, they're not amazing, but the fact that it's not polished speaks to their characters, particularly Jack. So that didn't bother me that he wasn't, Broadway material necessarily.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I know that in the theater version, I think they like left out some songs and they added some other songs.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Are you not a fan?
No.
Yeah, they also combined Duran's character with Sarah, and they combined her to
Yeah,
this other
that
character.
also is really annoying. Her character is super annoying in the musical, so that also ruins it. Because this story is not about romance. Like, there's a little bit of romance in it, but that is not what this story is about. This story is supposed to be about brotherly love and that sort of thing, that sort of camaraderie, and yeah, that's what really shows in this film.
Yeah, they hinted at it for a little bit, but they kind of dropped it, which I don't mind.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read some reviews of this film. So I'm gonna bring it up really quick. All right. So okay. So Michael Willington of the Los Angeles Times says this: certain movies engage your affection so strongly that even if they start to fall apart, you tend to keep rooting for them. That's pretty much the case with Newsies. Thoughts?
I'm not really sure what he means about that.
I think what he's saying that even though the movies like kind of like this particular film gauged your affection, like your attachment to them, that even though the story seems to be falling apart, you tend to keep rooting for the characters. I think that's what
I
he's trying
don't
to say.
think the story was falling apart. I don't think that's a fair assessment, but
Okay.
that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another one from Hartford Courant. That's the name of the publication. Okay. With Old New York recreated by William Sandfeld, Newsies often looks wonderful, and Bale and the boys give it a heart and excitement. Yet, as a musical, Newsies rarely hits home.
I mean, I guess I could see where he's coming for that. It's not necessarily the strongest musical per se, but I think that the music is good and the story speaks for it, so it works.
Yeah. Here's another one called Larson on Film. So manages some acrobatic dance numbers, but they seem oddly confined by the camera's frame.
I wouldn't agree with that. I'd just say that it was a different type. It wasn't, again, not as polished as some other stuff might be.
Yeah. All right, here's the last one. It's from the Baltimore Sun. Newsies is a live-action musical, but it's only barely alive. Call it Snoozies.
Wow. Well, I don't agree with that, but I mean, that's
That,
kind of an opinion thing, I
yeah,
think.
that was like epic burn. Well, you wouldn't call it Snoozies though, right?
No, definitely not. I think it's a very cool story.
Yeah, I would call it Alivesies. All right, so okay, here's some trivia that we can learn. Um, so while Jack Kelly, who is Christian Bale, is singing Santa Fe, there's a part where he's riding a horse. The part when his arms are thrown out and he is bent back, he is actually riding on the shoulders of a stunt master.
Oh yeah, I knew that.
Oh, you knew that?
Yeah.
All right, here's another one for you. So at the time, the film was one of the lowest grossing live action movies in Disney's history. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. It kind of gained a cult following. That's how it's gained popularity.
Oh yeah. So although many newspaper moguls of the time hosted Christmas dinners and other holiday events for their newsboys, after the newsboys strike, Pulitzer even went as far as to host weekend events in vaudeville houses, the period equivalent of Kids Night at the movies. So, and this was at vaudeville houses. Oh wait, no, I thought it was wrong. I thought it said cabaret for a second. I got it confused because I was gonna say that's kind of an odd thing to have kids be in, but that I realized that they're not the same. Okay, here's another one. Christian Bale was supposedly ashamed to tell his friends that the movie was a musical.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And it was originally intended as a drama instead of a musical. So, are you glad that they decided to go with the musical route?
I am. I think it's an excellent musical, so I'm glad they decided to go that route.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another one. The dress at that Illy Keats wears in High Times, Hard Times number is an authentic 1899 dress. After every take, the customer had to constantly sew up small holes because the dress was so old and delicate.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. They gotta have attention to detail.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Here's another one. Okay, so most of the cast trained in dance and martial arts for 8 to 10 weeks, beginning in February 1991 until April before filming commenced.
Interesting.
Yeah, they had to learn martial arts because this was like a lot of martial arts movies. This is my top 10 martial arts film. Remember when they did like the quadruple flying kick?
I don't know. There was a lot of dancing.
Yeah. So here's another one. Most of the Newsies depicted in the film are based on real people. Wait, no, I already know that one. Here's another one. At the end of every week, the actors portraying the Newsies took it upon themselves to torment Kenny Ortega, and when an upturned bucket of water missed its mark, Bale and David Moscow soaked him with, as Kenny described it, water Uzis.
Wow.
Hilarious.
Sounds about right for a bunch of teenagers stuck
Yeah.
in a place for a long time.
Yeah, we all have fun here in set. And the film was originally released on April 10th, 1992, which would have been Joseph Pulitzer's 145th birthday.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do we think like Pulitzer would be described as a pretty decent villain in this film?
I think it works.
Yeah. So, okay, here's another one. The song King of New York was written as an afterthought by Menken and Fieldman and became their favorite song in the movie.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. So, here's another one. Joseph Pulitzer is part of the... Yeah, I know that. There was this one was like, did you know that Pulitzer was the reason why the Pulitzer Prize is a thing? I'm like, that has nothing to do with anything except for the fact that that's a character in the movie. So, would you recommend this film?
Oh yeah, it's a great movie. I think it's kind of one of those gems of Disney that not many people talk about, kind of like The Rocketeer. I mean, more people talk about Newsies than The Rocketeer, but I think it kind of falls into that category, kind of a hidden gem that came out of the 90s in Disney.
Right. What would you rate this film?
I'd give it 8 out of 10, probably.
8 out of 10. I'm gonna be a little bit more harsh and say 5 out of 10.
Cool.
Yeah. So, like, would you recommend the stage version?
I don't like the stage version. I can understand how if you just want to watch something with like good singers, I guess that's fine. But I don't think the story really cuts the mustard when it comes to the Newsies.
Yeah.
They really changed the story, and not for the better, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, this the 1992 film is the is the superior version.
Yes, by far.
Yeah. So, all right. Any final thoughts about this film?
I mean, like, I think it's really interesting, particularly given the fact that like all the actors are so young. I think Christian Bale was about 17 when he did the movie, and I think all the other boys were around the same age, which I think really adds to the story's heart, because you have all these kids, going up against the man, and all of them are very talented, and I just think it's a real good movie, and Christian Bale really shines in it. It really shows that he was going places. You watch this movie, you can tell that he was definitely gonna end up doing bigger and better things.
Yeah, I think he was in Empire of the Sun before this.
Yeah, but I mean, like, who watched that?
Oh snap! Yeah,
It's a good movie, but I don't think many people were necessarily talking about that. Plus, he was like 12 when he did that. So.
that's true. Yeah. My dad was actually a newsie too in San Antonio.
Really?
Yeah. I asked him if he wanted to watch the film, and he said no. So, it is what it is. All right, so Newsies, check it out. It's a pretty fun film. It's a really nice romp. It's a merry lark, as they say, and you can check it out then. All right, bye.
Bye.